Hello, everyone, once again, and thank you for joining us today. Today, Janet is joining us to present about speaking skills, finding your voice, how to be a great presenter, and how to have your presentations picked up by the Salesforce, and so many things. I can't wait. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a brief of this series. This series just started recently, Impact Force. This series focuses on the soft skills because we all need soft skills no matter where we are in our current Salesforce journey or the career progression. So it's very important that we focus on the soft skills. So I approached Janet if she can speak to our group, and she readily accepted. And she has been very cooperative, and she is going to share a lot of information with that. And this session is going to be recorded, and please feel free to stop anytime between the session if you have any questions. Let's keep it interactive. And Janet, take it over.
Awesome. Thank you, JB. I wanted to emphasize the interactiveness. It's a small group. It's a pretty casual topic, and I would love to stop at any point and talk with you about your experiences or questions. So definitely feel free to stop me at any point if you have any questions. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. I have too many windows open, so that's part of the problem. Here we go. And are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
No. Yes. Okay, perfect. Let me put it on presentation mode here. Let's see. Are you seeing my presentation mode, or are you seeing the PowerPoint?
No, it's just the PowerPoint.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. It's called not being technically proficient at 7 a.m. How do I get it to show?
No
okay.
worries. Take your time, Janet.
Let's see. Find the meeting here. Stop sharing this. Let me start the presentation and share that is what I need to do. There we go. Now are you able to see the presentation?
Yes.
Great. Awesome. So JB was talking about how I've given talks on other topics before, but when she approached me about this Impact Force, I thought, I wanted to speak to something that was a little more general and, soft skills. And I thought that finding your voice was a great topic. And it's not something I've actually spoken on before. And you'll see during my presentation why I chose this topic. So this is tips for becoming a Salesforce speaker or presenter. So just a little bit about me. Janet Elliott. I'm a technical program manager for a company called POS Portal, and we're owned by a company called ScanSource. So POS, point of sale, we deal with the technology and the hardware for point of sale, like credit card swiping, that type of thing. So it's an interesting industry that I didn't know about until I got into it. So I've been doing that for about 10 years now and been Salesforce from day one. But this company was my first introduction to Salesforce. So again, been in the ecosystem for almost 10 years now. 5 times certified, just got my sharing and visibility designer. So really excited about that. Trying to get to application architect. A lightning champion. I run the Women in Tech user group in Sacramento, which is really fun. And also Sacramento Salesforce Saturday, which we have right after this. And it's a great group. And I just really love the Salesforce Saturday groups. A couple of random facts about me is, if you know me, I love camping and hiking. I go on these crazy road trips to national parks all over the United States with my kids. And I'm one of those people, it's kind of a love it or hate it, that I use way too many exclamation points in emails, all of it. So I'm one of those people. So good to know. So today, it's funny because I was telling my kids, I'm like, I'm speaking tomorrow, and what are you speaking about? Well, I'm speaking about speaking. So that's an interesting topic. So what I'd like to cover today is how I got started. I sort of took a reverse route into this whole speaking at Dreamforce. Once I did that, where there's room for improvement and how I address that. Just the things that make a good presentation. And why I would like to encourage you to be a speaker. What's in it for you? Why is that an important thing in the Trailblazer community to be a speaker? So the takeaways that I'd like you to have are to have confidence that you can become a speaker. All of us have that voice that we need to share with the community. So why should you be a speaker? What is the framework for a good presentation? I've done enough now where I feel, and I've watched a lot of presentations. This whole virtual, staying at home, I've been on Zoom calls. I've watched presentations from all over the world, as I know that we were just talking about that. So that's a fun way to see how other people are presenting and get some takeaways from that. And also, I hope that you leave with a spark of inspiration to go out and find a topic to speak about. So I'm interested from the group, we have a small enough group here. I'd like to talk about what comes to mind when you think about being a speaker. When you think, well, maybe I could present at a user group or at Dreamforce or one of the Dreamin' events. Like, what's your first reaction? Maybe you don't know what are you going to talk about? Maybe it's, I'm way too nervous to get in front of a group of people. And what's nice about these virtual times is that it's a lot easier to do it on video than it is to stand up in front of 200 people and do a speech. So now's a good time to try it out. I'm going to look at the chat here because I can see people. Oh, okay. Maybe this is definitely my thought when I was thinking about giving my talk at Dreamforce. The audience is going to know way more than me, and they're just going to sit there with a list of notes and judge everything that I say. Maybe I'm not experienced enough. You see some of these Dreamforce presentations or some of the Salesforce webinars, and you think, well, I'm not experienced enough. These people have way more experience than me, and I'm just going to listen to the experts. Or maybe nobody cares about my stories. I'm just some person hanging out. I'm in Sacramento, California. Like, why would anybody care to hear what I have to talk about? Or maybe you have some other reason. So I'm curious from the group here. Feel free to come off mute or in the chat. Maybe you do have speaking experience, but what's that initial sort of gut reaction when you think about speaking especially but in the Salesforce ecosystem? Oh, interesting. So Justin, you have trouble making an hour-long presentation shorter. So you have a longer presentation and you have trouble like cutting it down into the time frame. Is that what you're saying? Give you my desk. Oh, I'm going to talk about that. Oh, go ahead, Justin.
No, I was just saying that you got it right. I just
okay.
When I start to write, I have a huge this is important and this is important and this is important, and then suddenly you're an hour long and you're like, well, they're all important. How do I cut one? And I can't kill my babies.
Right. That's interesting because I think that's actually a really good point. I think that there's two camps there. There's I have way too much to talk about. How do I make it short enough? And you just made me think of a story that I'll tell later because I've given 20-minute talks and I've given 40-minute talks. And the difference, it was an interesting experience. And then there's also the camp of, I have 10 minutes worth of material. How am I going to make that last for an hour? And you kind of, I think we've all been to those talks where, the people are just dragging it out. Imposter syndrome.
I really like that quote attributed to Mark Twain about like, I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long one instead. and it's taken me years to understand the humor of that.
Actually, Justin, even I'm in the same boat. I struggle a lot to keep it short. I don't know which points to take off my presentation. That's the more time I spend than creating the content.
Well, it's not even just presentation. I don't want to derail, so I'll just make this point and get out. But like writing my emails to my team and my boss, like if they're more than 4 paragraphs long, it's like, whoops, there's something wrong here. Nobody is reading those.
So Justin, you and I are birds of a feather on that because it's the one thing in my performance reviews. I get good performance reviews, but my boss is always like, you need to be more concise. So I'm known to write these like novel long emails. So that's definitely something I'm working on. So I feel you on that for sure. And Jason, getting your best ideas after getting into bed. I have the same problem. I'm driving to work, I'm getting coffee, I'm walking around the block, I'm in the shower. So I'm going to talk about that actually. And imposter syndrome, Carrie, yes, 100%. We'll talk about that in a second. When I decided to submit a talk to Dreamforce, that was my initial impact that I had, was that who was I to talk about this topic? Oh, and Rathina, a little nervous about delivering an impressive presentation while delivering pre-sales presentations. That's interesting, because that's another that's a valid topic, because that's a little bit less about speaking to a user group and more about like day-to-day in your work, like giving an effective presentation. And that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but I do have some thoughts about that, because I do the same thing at work, giving presentations both to like end users and also to like executives. So that's a very valid thought there. So thank you for your input on that. One of the things I'll talk about is knowing your audience, and I can see now that we're all on the same page here, because I felt all of these things also. So that was great feedback. So first, I'd like to start with how I got started as a speaker, also known as, I've got a crazy idea, let's speak at Dreamforce. Like, let's just do it. And again, that was one of those, I'm in bed and a little spark came to me like, hey, let's speak at Dreamforce. But why would I want to do that? So I've been to Dreamforce twice. I'm not like these people who've been since, 2001, and I've been to every Dreamforce. I've only been to two. I went in 2018 and 2019. In 2018, I'd been in the ecosystem, but I wasn't super involved in the community. And no matter how much people prepare you for going to Dreamforce, it's just like, woo, it's so overwhelming. So I was a little bit of a deer in a headlights the first time I went to Dreamforce. But then the next year came around. And so thinking back to the summer of 2019, again, it was a crazy idea. My company is fairly large, and we usually send 6 to 8 people to Dreamforce. But I wasn't entirely sure if I was going to be one of those people. They wait till the last minute to decide who's going to go. And so I thought, how can I ensure that I'm on that list? What can I do to make sure that I'm going to be on the list to go to Dreamforce? Because it's just like the funnest. Of course, it's professionally interesting for sure, but it's also like a really fun event. So they had a call for speakers, and I noticed that you get a free ticket to Dreamforce. And so I'm like, okay, let's see if we can make that happen. But what am I going to speak about? I hadn't spoken the Salesforce ecosystem before, so like, what would I speak about? So at the time, my job's changed a little bit. I had done 1 million data migrations of every size and complexity from both a project management standpoint and like a BA standpoint, and working directly with a coworker who is a developer to run scripts and stuff. So her and I had worked together on a lot of data migration. So we thought, I don't know, that's the one thing we thought we could talk about on a technical level. Like, let's talk about data migrations. Sure. Doesn't sound very exciting, I know, but we knew that we felt comfortable with that topic. So once I decided that I was going to submit a presentation, I thought, let me find a co-conspirator. So that was my coworker who readily agreed, because she also wasn't sure that she was going. So although I'd like to say that we were inspired to share with the community and be involved that way, it was really, how can I go to Dreamforce for free? Was really the impetus for that. So when you submit to Dreamforce, you submit an abstract. So you don't have to have your idea fully formed. You just have to write an abstract about it. So, you don't have to put a lot of work into it. So we wrote an abstract. We actually submitted 2, one from the project management viewpoint and one from the developer viewpoint, which was a much more technical talk. Well, the developer one got accepted. So we were co-presenters on that. So we got the acceptance that we were going to speak, and I had to just like, oh, wow, I had a crazy idea, and then I went with it, and now, like, what have I gotten myself into? I panicked a little bit, like, this is nuts. I'm going to be at Dreamforce. I'm going to be on the websites. I'm going to be presenting to a bunch of people. Like, your professional reputation is at stake. But we just sat down and got to work, and I will tell you, it was a lot of work. Not only because you're presenting at Dreamforce, it's a very professional international conference, but it was the first time that we had really spoken on a technical topic. So we had to create slides, write scripts, revise it. We did dry runs with ourselves. We did dry runs with the Salesforce. You get a sponsor that from Salesforce that works with you. We had to do it for him, and we revised it 1 million different times. So I've never practiced a talk so much. but it was a really great experience. And it's funny because a lot of the people who speak at Dreamforce, you know, they have experience speaking, and then they're like, okay, now let's go speak at Dreamforce. Well, like I said, we did it backwards, but it was kind of an interesting way to do it. So we get to Dreamforce, and, you know, Dreamforce is a whirlwind. So it was a Wednesday when we spoke. So you're going through all this, you're having fun at Dreamforce, you're going to all these other talks, and then suddenly, oh my gosh, it's Wednesday morning and you have to speak. You walk in, we were in one of the big rooms. It was a 40-minute session. And so the people start coming in, they're connecting you up with a microphone, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is really like professional. Like, this isn't just, you know, speaking at work. This is a big deal. And by the way, we're going to video it, we're going to record it, like, and then boom, there's a big timer that they put in front of you that you can see from the stage, and then boom, you're on, and you're like, oh my gosh, deer in the headlights. But we had practiced enough that, you know, we did it. I'm not saying it was the greatest, most inspirational speech. It's going to go down in history, but we really knew our topic well, and we had a really well-defined presentation, is what I wanted to say. And, you know, it was over, and I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, I just spoke at Dreamforce. Like, that's cool. And nobody fell asleep. The hordes did not leave the room, and nobody threw anything at us. So I'm like, I guess we accomplished it, and we survived. And people actually had questions. And that was like, I don't know why, but that was the most like satisfying thing when people came to ask us questions, because I'm like, okay, it seemed like we knew what we were talking about. So that was successful. So it was an interesting way to just dive in and, hey, I'm going to speak at Dreamforce. It was a great experience. It was nerve-wracking as heck, but it was a great experience. So after that, and of course I went to a lot of other presentations, but after that I thought, let me think back on that experience and what were just the initial things that I learned from doing that. Like, I immediately like played the whole thing back in my head. There was pictures of me standing up there, and I'm like, what am I doing? What am I wearing? You know, what's going on here? So it's important to, you know, think back every time you speak. So the things that I learned from that initial talk at Dreamforce were the practice definitely helped me get over the nerves. That's more than I practiced for any talk since then. And because it was a technical talk, it required some practice. Just that one experience at Dreamforce, I felt like I belong. I can speak on these topics. Like, I felt comfortable that people would listen to what I had to say. Confidence definitely comes with experience. Every time I give some sort of a talk, I reflect on the ways that I'm going to improve that. You have that self-critical thing in your head, but I always think about ways that I can improve it. And again, like I spoke before, I get ideas from other presentations. Over time, the Dreamforce other presentations, but all the virtual ones I've been to, I always think back every time I go to a presentation, like, what did I like about that? What spoke to me? What type of an impression, feeling did I leave with? You're going to go to a lot of technical presentations. There's no way you're ever going to remember everything that people are talking about, but you leave sort of like, how did that make you feel? Did it inspire you, or did it make you want to go learn more about it or talk to that person more? I think about those talks where I've had that impression and what was particular about that sort of talk. So that was, you know, I did this big thing at Dreamforce, and like, what were my initial takeaways from that? So then what's next? I thought, okay, I'm awesome. I'm going to go just talk about data migrations all day long. So I went to SenCal Dreamin'. It's a small Dreamin' conference that they had in Fresno. And we talked about data migrations again. But what was interesting about that one was I knew that at Dreamforce, you know, that if people were coming to talk about data migrations, that they were probably like developers, and we were going to talk really technical about it. So with SenCal Dreamin', we talked about data migrations again, but the audience was different. And it was really interesting to see the different impact that talk had, because it wasn't quite the right audience. It was a very new to the ecosystem audience. And they were like, okay, I'm not sure what a data migration is, and we need to transform the data, and there's some technical things about writing scripts for it. And so it went over their head a little bit, which is okay. But if I had thought a little bit more about who the audience was, we would have tailored that talk to be to the right level. So that was a really important takeaway from that session. So then I thought, data migrations, you know, I'm getting kind of tired of talking about this really technical topic, let me try to figure out another topic to speak about, and just myself, because I wanted to travel to some of the Dreamin' events. So True North Dreamin' came up, and I thought, let me talk about requirements gathering. I had an idea to do a talk about requirements gathering with a different, sort of like different personalities. You know, you have different groups that you're gathering requirements from. It might be an end client or it might be internal. So I had this idea. I hadn't formed it up yet. And that got accepted. So I was really excited to travel up to Vancouver. And then COVID-19 hit, as we all know, and all of the events got canceled. So I thought, well, I'm just going to have to wait till next year to keep going down this speaker route. But then, ta-da, virtual events. I was so excited that, you know, the virtual events started coming up. And the first one was Virtual Dreamin'. I don't know if any of you attended Virtual Dreamin'. That was one of the first major attempts at trying to do a virtual event. And there was a lot of people attended that. I don't think people had Zoom fatigue yet. So I thought, what am I passionate about? What do I personally want to talk about? And I had just passed Platform Developer 1. So I was thinking back about what, you know, my last year had been and what I thought might have an impact on people. So I had been involved in Rad Women Code, which is a group that introduces you non-technical background, introduces you how to code, and it's a very community-oriented, inspirational, motivating group. I'd worked for 5 months to study for Platform Developer 1, and I had just passed it, and it just had a huge personal impact on me, just the satisfaction of passing that certification because it's hard, and also the impact it had on my work, the value of that certification and the impact it had on my career. I just felt really passionate about that. And I thought, how can I take my experience and wrap it up and give back to the community, because so many people had inspired me with their talks or seeing them on Twitter or LinkedIn, things that they had accomplished. Like, how can I give back and inspire others? So that was the motivation for the topic, 0 to PD1. And I broke it into, slide is actually incorrect. Let me talk about Agile. Let me just change this on the fly. And I didn't want to talk about, like, here's all of the technical specifications for passing Platform Developer 1, because there are a ton of resources for that. I wanted to talk about the mindset, the motivation for it, how you master the topic, and the importance of finding a mentor. So that was the topic that I started to put together. And one of the things I realized when I, you know, again, it's another one of those, I'm on a walk, I have an idea, I want to talk about passing Platform Developer 1, but how do I put that together into some sort of coherent presentation? And I came up with these 4 M's, and I was like, oh, this all is starting to make sense. And the difference between doing this presentation and the one on data migrations was that it was so much easier to put the presentation together because it was a topic that I was so passionate about. And the same thing with the presentation today. I just thought about it and put it together because I'm passionate about that topic. So that was an interesting difference in sort of forcing yourself to talk about, you know, something that maybe you know a lot about, but you're not passionate about, and finding something that you really have a strong feeling about. So passion for the topic made that easier. Speaking from the heart and with purpose, I feel like that comes across, and that was one of the pieces of, you know, feedback that I had gotten and also seen in other presentations. I was able to show my personal story, and I feel like that makes a good presentation when someone speaks about the topic from their perspective and not just from the higher level point of view, and they don't tell any personal stories. I think it makes it more relatable. And I knew what I wanted others to get from that presentation. So when I was talking about data migrations, you know, I wanted them to learn how we did data migrations. But with the 0 to PD1 topic, I knew that I wanted people to leave with some confidence, with the idea that there's a community of people, that if you have a non-technical background, you can certainly take this on. So that was just like, it was an interesting difference between speaking on a technical topic that I wasn't, I mean, I am kind of passionate about data migrations. It's a little weird, but it's kind of a fun thing to do. But talking about this topic where I just in my gut knew that I was passionate about it. I really felt the difference in speaking. So I took that topic and I did virtual dreaming. I recently did Uniting Minds Summer Camp, which was another smaller virtual event a few weeks ago. And then what was super fun is we had a panel discussion for my Women in Tech group. It was 2 parts. I invited these other women who came from the same non-technical background and had gotten PD1. And we just had this great discussion. And they were all very passionate about it also. So that further solidified that this was a good topic and that other people were in the same boat as I so that they could relate. So then I'd spoken several times and I thought, what is going to make a good presentation? So kind of take a moment right now and think about what presentations have had an impact on you. I can think of 3 or 4. Certainly I get something out of every time somebody speaks, but I can think of 3 or 4 presentations where I can still remember how I feel when I left the room or I, finished the webinar and what was different about them. So I'm curious from the group here, if you have any thoughts of what presentations stick in your mind and what was specific about it that, it had that impact on you.
There's one that I keep sharing over and over again. It is a TED Talk, so I mean, it feels unfair to say that, but I'm like, why do I share it over and over again? Like every company I join, I usually end up sending a few people the link and reminding them that there's some really good strategies talked about in here. And I think what I love about it is the use of examples. Like they do a great job of, here's some mediocre example, and then here's how we made a great example. And like, then you land the point, you land the message so great when you don't only show the best practice. And if you're all curious, it's the Dan O'Reilly talk about destroying your bionicles and choice and stuff like that.
I'd definitely be interested in, if you want to post a link in the chat, I'm always interested in seeing those.
Yeah, I'll find it. I mean, I share it all the time.
You really need to give an example yourself, Justin. Yeah, you're talking about giving examples.
But that is a great point because, God, I just love this discussion. Because the things that some of the guys the things that you guys are talking about hit home with me. And in this virtual times and with Twitter, I don't know if you guys are active on Twitter. I'm very active and in LinkedIn. It's become more of a norm for people to talk about, hey, I failed this exam, and here's what I'm going to do differently, or people supporting them and try it again. And I think that's an awesome point about what makes a good presentation. Yes, I agree. It kind of makes you're right. It does land the point. So that's a great example. And I forgot to include this, so something for the next time I do it. I failed Platform Developer 1 the first time I took it, and that's something that we talked about in the panel discussion that we did. Sort of encourage people like, you know what, you might fail it. You've got to learn from that. You got to move forward. So that's a really good example. I feel like, was there more in the chat and then I can't see it? I can't tell if there's something in the chat.
There's nothing, Janet. You covered everything so far.
And just Jason and I making jokes to each other. Sorry about that.
Totally fine. And then, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, actually, yeah, so, we were going back and forth, but I was making a point off of one of your points about relatability for audiences and how that's good to be able to know beforehand, which is also great for pre-sales as well. Know your audience, speak to your audience. It's a presentation, so you have to be present. That's who you're speaking to. It's not for you, it's for them. So you always want to keep that engagement. I think it's harder in the time of virtual meetings or for certain even type of in-person meetings. I feed on feedback. So it's a different type of presentation when you have to just be prepared to know your audience beforehand, but also being able to, they say be charming, have humor, and be humble, which is like what's good about like giving examples, showing you want to show you're human, you want to show you're approachable, and also have great body language as well. Like there's like a book of like TED Talks of how they present. So being able to make yourself approachable, you want to mirror for the audience how you want them to feel. So you want to feel relaxed and positive. to just subliminally get them to feel that as well.
So what you can't, that's a great point also, because when I saw pictures of myself speaking to Dreamforce, I was like, oh, I got to work on this. I need to videotape, how I'm walking around the stage. But what you can't see right now, and what's nice about virtual, is I just have my hands in my pocket. I don't have to worry about, the stage presentation. So that makes virtual a lot easier because I don't have to worry about that.
So yeah, exactly. That's why a clicker is really good. Holding a clicker or holding something I got right over here, like a squeezy ball I hold to pace myself, because it's really good for pacing yourself. If you just think, okay, talk slower, don't say talk slower, you're going to do that. So you want to instead just like, oh gosh, don't be nervous, don't mess up. You're going to be thinking about that. Clear your head about all that by filling your head with other things. Hold something so that aesthetically you can pace yourself.
Yeah, that's I like that. I like the idea of the squeezy ball. That's a really good idea. And your point about being present, I compare the speaking at Dreamforce. We had practiced it so much that I was able to just recite it in my head. I knew my lines because I couldn't speak extemporaneously on the topic in front of 200 people, like with all that pressure. Where this topic that I'm speaking about now, I can just talk about this all day long without a script. So that is a really good point about being present. People can tell. We've all been to the presentations, especially at Dreamforce, some of the large ones where it's a topic that I thought I was going to be interested in, and then I just find myself like, the person is just reciting information and it's not really that impactful. So I think that's a great point. I'm going to take a quick sip of coffee here.
Yeah. And also, yeah, exactly. Not just the speaking, but the presentation to the slides, not just reciting words off the screen.
Yeah.
Keep because people can only be able to have so much focus. So you want to, like Steve Jobs, there's a book about like presentation of Steve Jobs and his examples, like being able to keep the visual like a compliment, something to talk. You put one slide up there and you're able to talk about that.
For sure.
My dream is to find an improv PowerPoint event somewhere, because it sounds hilarious. You write like 8 random slides and then somebody else has to present those slides without any knowledge of what's coming next.
That sounds super fun.
It would go from like a picture of water to a graph to a picture of a duck, and they have to make it make sense somehow. But to your guys' point, and to add to the discussion, like I feel like when you make slides, you have to write 2 presentations. There's the slides presentation, which might be out of context if it gets forwarded around, and is that clear enough on its own? And then you write like you were saying, you had to practice your lines. Like, what are you adding to the slide that you're going to say verbally? Right. This is just a prompt to remind me to tell this quick story, For sure. and so it's like you end up feeling like you practiced it full twice, just by the time you finish the deck,
Those are all great points. And then Carrie wrote, the presentations I've enjoyed the most feel more like a conversation, even though the speaker is the only one talking. And the reason I feel like that's such a great insight is because it's the presentations where it makes you think inside your head. So you feel like you're having this conversation with the person, even though they're the only one talking, because they're thinking of things that are also making you think. So that's a great insight there.
Oh, she just reminded me of a huge insight that I learned very much the hard way. Don't speak to an audience of 4 people like there's 200 people in the room. Like, I realized I have this like this large audience voice or tone that I would apply, and I was like, oh no, that's just, we should be just having a conversation. There's 4 people here.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point too, and it's something I've tried to adapt, and I'll talk about here in a minute, like some of the adaptations that I've made based on going to other presentations and seeing, what I thought was impactful there.
A big learning experience for me, I had an opportunity to teach English as a foreign language. I went to Beijing, and actually I had the training through Disney. Disney had a program. They opened up schools over there, big market. And so that instructor taught me that if the learner isn't speaking, they're not learning. Now that's really just more specifically for teaching English as a foreign language, but also with engaging your audience, making sure that you're able to get that feedback and being mindful of when you're presenting, you're not just speaking to if you're speaking to 4 people, not just speaking like you're speaking to 200 people, you're not speaking for yourself, you're being present.
Yeah, no, those are really great points, and definitely something that I felt, like I said, personal experience from speaking to 200 people, and now I really appreciate the feedback here because the conversation, and then you guys are saying things that I'm like, oh yes, that's such a great idea, and it speaks to my presentation a little bit, so I definitely, that's really good feedback. So speaking of not just talking to the slide with words, so characteristics of a good presentation, I hope that, you know, one of my huge takeaways from here is to find something that you're passionate to talk about. And you want to, the talks that I've been to that have been so impactful is I feel that person's passion coming through. Sharing experiences and examples, hopefully, I think that helps you identify with the person. And I've had some real breakthroughs in, it's helped me in my professional career, seeing other people talk about something they're passionate about and representing to me, like, maybe I can do that. You know, maybe I can be a Salesforce architect, or, you know, those types of inspirational things. Engaging and interacting with the audience. It's easier a little bit to do it virtually because we have chat and the video, but that's definitely something I'm working on in my presentations because I've gotten a lot more out of the talks where I've been able to engage with the speaker. And again, something to the point of the comment earlier, things that make me think. The speaker says something and then, you know, I go off on my own sort of train of thought about it. So they're obviously making an impact on me. You leave with some sort of knowledge or inspiration. So, you know, some of the technical talks, you're not necessarily going to leave with a huge amount of inspiration, but you're leaving with a little bit of knowledge, maybe not remembering everything the person said, but enough to go back and, you know, find their slides or Google it, like you're leaving with that knowledge and or inspiration. I've been inspired by a lot of the talks that I've been to, and that's one of the reasons that I like to give presentations, is hopefully that I'm inspiring people to either, you know, take on PD1 or go out there and speak or be involved in the community. And you see yourself in them in some way. Maybe it's your career trajectory. Maybe, you know, it's women in tech. Maybe it's somebody in a position that you're looking to scale up. Or really important these days, maybe it's their identity. You know, their gender identity, racial identity, they're a woman, they're, you know, whatever the identity that you might relate to. The representation of having people speak from all diverse, authentic places, I think really has an impact. So this is a little bit more practical advice, and you guys may have some additional thoughts on this also. So impactful slides, you know, it's the visual, putting together the visual with what you're talking about. So have slides that make an impact and just leave, like I said, that feeling when you leave the talk. Less text, not reading the slides. That's something that we did a pretty good job of that at Dreamforce because we knew the topic well enough. But I've definitely been to ones where they have just paragraphs and the people are just reading them. Tell stories. I love hearing, it's my favorite talks are when people tell personal stories that I can relate to. And here's the next topic about, you know, you have these thoughts when you're in bed. I was a philosophy major, and so I just always have these random thoughts. And so I have, I use Evernote pretty religiously. And so when I have a thought, the first thing I do is I just jot it down, and I just have these different notebooks for like random speaking ideas, or here's this idea for work that I want to pursue. I write it down immediately. And then a couple weeks later when I'm like, oh, I need to put these ideas together, I'm really happy that I've, you know, thrown all this down on a piece of paper. So definitely capture those ideas, because even if I have some crazy ideas. So even if they're crazy, just jot them down, because it's sort of putting it down on paper makes it a little more realistic. And then, you know, maybe you'll do it. Practice your timing. Like I said, I've done 20-minute talks and I've done 40. The Salesforce is really strict about the timing. Like they're pulling you off the stage because people are coming in the room. So it was really important in that one to practice the timing. And then when I spoke at Virtual Dreaming, I was only giving a 20-minute presentation on 0 to PD1, which was too short. And I had practiced my timing and I was really, really good about it. But they had this intro that was like 5 minutes long and it just threw off my timing. So I guess not only practice your timing, but be flexible enough to have a little leeway to make it a little bit shorter or a little bit longer. So that was an important lesson to learn. Understanding the time frames of the event. Like I said, with virtual dreaming, I thought I had 20 minutes, but I really only had 15 minutes. So now I'm a little more upfront when I am going to speak somewhere to find out, like, what is my time frame? What are the expectations? That's sort of some practical advice. Know your audience. Oh yeah, Justin, go ahead.
That really blew my mind when you were talking about the losing 5 minutes, and the previous point too about the strictness of Dreamforce. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't attended here today. But when you were talking about losing time, I just wanted to tell a quick anecdote, because I've performed stand-up comedy, and they're really strict on time too, because you get 3 minutes or 5 minutes depending on what your level is, essentially. And it blew my mind when I started to go to competitions, and if your set is good, people are laughing. And I would play back my set, each year, and wonder, like, why did I go over on time? Why did I go over on time? And I figured out it was because the laughter was taking up a full minute of this like 4-minute set that I had. And I'm like, oh no. So I really only have 2 minutes of material in a 3-minute contest set.
Yeah.
It blew my mind, because it sounds like almost no time at all.
Well, that's a really good point. And also, to Jason's point, you do have to be agile, because as I've tried to make my presentations more interactive, I'm kind of never sure when I go into a group, like, maybe they're not going to say anything, and I'm going to be 10 minutes short, but it's never worked out that way. It's always been, we've always been able to engage in conversation, but you do have to be agile and be ready to be flexible with, your timing, for sure. So I've definitely learned that. Start small. So God, there's so many options now virtually to present. I mean, it could be just at your work. We did our Dreamforce presentation to the people at our work, and that made us feel better about it. There's Salesforce Saturdays. I feel like Phoenix has a pretty strong Salesforce Saturday group. That's a much more casual environment, and you can get some feedback on that. And we have a Salesforce Saturday group, and I like to encourage people to speak at it, even if it's just for 5 minutes, just to start to gain that confidence. And of course, user group meetings like this. And then getting a little bit bigger, there's the Dream In events, and then also, of course, Dreamforce. So I don't know, they didn't have a call for speakers for Dreamforce this year, but next year you've got time to think of your idea and start preparing, and you can definitely do it. Getting feedback. When we did our Dreamforce presentation at work, it was great, because these were people who knew that they could just tell it like it is. And we got some awesome feedback from people, and you have to take that and consider it. Recording yourself. So when we did the Dreamforce one, we didn't record ourselves because we didn't have this virtual and being on camera and Zoom meetings and stuff. But since then, as I've given talks, I watch them back, and that's really helpful. So recording yourself is a great idea. And as we've talked about, watching other presentations, you really start to get an idea of the impact that people have in other presentations. So now this is what I want you to take away from this, though. We can read a lot about practical advice and experiences that other people have, but why I think it's important that each one of you specifically, think about speaking and sharing your experiences is that your voice and your perspective are needed. I've become really involved in the Salesforce community over the last year, and I'm blown away with the amount of people that I've met and the diverse thoughts and diverse people that I've been able to interact with. Like, it's just blown my mind, and it's really expanded my universe of thinking and helped me professionally and personally. So don't underestimate the importance of your voice and the authenticity that's really come through for some reason for me in this last year of the virtual meetings. I think this whole idea of we're all going through COVID together and it's kind of this common struggle, I think has allowed people to be more vulnerable. And so the authenticity of people speaking really comes through, and now is a great time to share your authentic self. Like, let your personality and your experiences shine through. I want to confirm to you that you do not need to be an expert in order to talk at a Salesforce event. There's a spectrum of experience that people have. There's people who are just getting into the ecosystem, and then there's people who've been to every Dreamforce since they started. And your story or your topic is going to speak to somebody on that spectrum of experience. So we don't all need, these highly technical developer talk, about trigger frameworks. That's fine, and that has a point, but maybe you just started. Maybe you just got your first Salesforce job, and if you can talk about your experience with, how I started in the Salesforce ecosystem, that's going to speak to somebody else. So feel confident that your experience is common enough that it'll help somebody else just getting started. Or maybe, there's a lot of talks about flows lately, which is great, and people have a lot of experience and they talk about that. But maybe you just started. I really just started getting into flows, and I thought, well, there's other people who are just getting started, or maybe they're afraid. It just seems too hard to them. So your voice, like the top 5 things I learned when I started with flows, inspires other people. So don't feel like you can't speak because you're not like an expert on the topic. That the passion is what is going to need to shine through. Because you guys are involved in the Trailblazer community, you probably know this, but I want to assure you that the Trailblazer community will cheer you on. It's a really supportive environment. So they're not going to judge you, or they're going to help you along. It's just a really great community. If you want to start speaking, they're going to be very supportive. It's very, it's inspirational to me, or it gives me satisfaction to help inspire others and give back to the community. I have gained a lot from the Trailblazer community, professionally and personally, and I feel it's important to sort of reach back and help people up the hill with you. So the opportunity to give back is very satisfying, and is what the Trailblazer community is all about. And then something I didn't talk about yet was the networking and opportunities that you gain. Being a speaker, being asked to speak at different user groups. I've met just the greatest array of people around the world and have made friends virtually because of it, and have gotten some opportunities because of it. Just networking or professional presence, the opportunities that I've gained from it are huge. So I want you to walk away thinking, I can do this. Sure, I can speak at something. There's something that you're passionate about that you can speak on. So I always like to, I'm a huge quote person, and I was trying to find a quote that kind of spoke to this topic, and I came up with this one: effective communication is 20% what you know and 80% how you feel about what you know. And I felt like that spoke to being passionate, and like Jason was talking about being present, that quote really speaks to that. And that's really what I want you to take away. Find something you're passionate about. You specifically can be a speaker. It's important. You belong up on the stage, and people want to hear what you have to say. So I hope that you have a little bit of a spark of inspiration from this, and can start thinking, maybe jotting down in your notebook, or like I said, Evernote, or on your phone. Just randomly have ideas, and they'll start to form up. And I hope to, if any of you are speaking anywhere, please invite me, because I hope to see you up on stage.
That was so wonderful, Janet. I'm really impressed by the amount of information you have put in here. This is awesome. And I want to highlight some of the points that you have mentioned. That is about,
I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, although I'm not sure. Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry to interrupt you. There we go. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, you mentioned about one point: you don't need to be the expert, and start presenting to smaller groups, and then gradually start presenting to the larger groups. I want to share my personal story here. I am a shy person, introvert, or I'm very nervous with respect to presenting, and presenting up is something that really scares me. So I started with doing some study session, with the study sessions first, and then user group meetings, and then I gradually started presenting to the larger groups. And then my advice for anyone who is beginning to start presenting is, don't stop yourself. Don't feel that people are judgmental. I really feel proud to be part of the Salesforce community, where we are all allies of each other. We all try to help each other. I don't see any situation where somebody is coming and criticizing. We're all there to help each other. So don't think that people are judgmental. You try to improve, continuously evaluate, and try to refine, and you'll be there soon.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. The Trailblazer community is just, it blows my mind just how supportive it is. So yeah, that's a really good point.
And Janet, I want to ask a question just for the general audience, to stress upon the preparation. I know preparation is the key for a presentation to make us feel confident, to make us feel thorough about the content. So how much time do you spend preparing for a presentation?
So that's an interesting point, because once I found some topics that I was more passionate about, it was much easier, and I actually had to prepare less because I can be present and I can just sort of speak to it. So when it came to Dreamforce, and of course, if I speak at Dreamforce again, that is a bigger stage. Oh my, we spent so many hours. I mean, we just spent the weeks leading up to Dreamforce pretty much spending at least half our working time preparing for that. When I'm speaking about something I'm passionate about, it's less, I'm preparing the slides. And sometimes I tell my kids this when they're doing their homework and they're having to present something for school, they always go to starting with the slides and how are the slides going to look? And they spend so much time on just moving things around in PowerPoint and just the slides. That shouldn't be where you spend the majority of your time. It should be on the ideas. And so because I have this Evernote book and I'm jotting things down, I have it formed up as an idea on where I want to go before I go to start the slides. So I think the preparation should be more in the thought and less in these were not brilliant slides that I had here. I mean, they could have been more exciting, but I'm hoping that because of the talk that I've given, that's what's come through and not so much worrying about the technical part of the slides.
Great point. Remember at the beginning, I brought up, editing and having to take slides out because of time. And it's interesting that you said you start there, because that's how I've ended, and I've probably wasted hours, because at the end, when I need to cut 5 slides, I look at every single one and I go, if they forgot this slide, would I be okay with that? And then I'll look at the next slide and be like, if this is the only thing they remembered from this slide, am I okay with that? And that's how I make my cut, like the takeaway.
Yeah.
2 hours after the talk, what are they going to keep with them?
Yeah. And they don't, so we've all been to the presentations where it's just slide after slide after slide of bullet points, and you're taking pictures of them or your screenshots, and it's overwhelming. So the preparation and the ideas, I think, is definitely where I've learned along the way.
I have a question for you, Janet, because you mentioned spending so much of your work time on the presentation. Can you speak just briefly about, does your employer support that, or should I feel guilty if I'm using work hours to work on a presentation we're all here today. It's a Saturday morning. Our bosses aren't in the room. I feel kind of like this is a selfish endeavor to want to speak. And yet, does the employer see a benefit that they're getting too by having you speak?
So Dreamforce was different than now, although I do have a very supportive employer and very flexible work schedule. So I just get my job done and that's fine. Right. And they know I'm involved in this. But that one, because it was Dreamforce and it was, they were all excited because they could say we had people speak at Dreamforce. And so there was the employer thought it was cool that their logo was up there and we could represent ourselves. So they were willing to allow us that time. And again, I have a very flexible work environment, so we were still getting our job done. Since then, I don't really spend very much work time doing it because I'm doing it less. It's less about I'm representing the company than I'm representing myself in the community. So I don't spend as much time, and it's definitely going to depend on your employer. But it's a little bit about what's in it for them if they're going to allow you the time.
Sure.
And wait, I wanted to go back. I'm looking at the chat. Somebody was, so Jason, you're giving your first presentation today. And then somebody was, Carrie, you were interviewed on the Salesforce Admins podcast. I had listened to that, so I'll have to go back and make sure that I've seen yours. And then, that's funny. You spent hours preparing, but like I said, I was a philosophy major. And so I spent a lot of time mulling things over in my head. And I think, you spent that 5 hours and it was only 5 questions, but that allowed you to sort of, not edit isn't the right word, but get it straight in your head, what you wanted to come across. So I think that is, I don't know. I mean, I think that's important, and we all do that when we speak.
Yeah, and I think it was great because it gave me the time to not only think about my answers, but also practice answering them in a way that sounded friendly and conversational and not rehearsed and not practiced and not as if I was reading it from a script. So I think it was time well spent, but definitely stressful because a lot of people listen to that podcast. Yes. And I wanted to make sure that it went well.
And that's I love talking to you guys because you just make me think of other things. Right. The time that I spent preparing for Dreamforce was very mechanical. It was like, what is my script? I'm going to kind of memorize it, but then I'm going to kind of want to speak extemporaneously on it. Whereas now when I'm doing talks, the preparation isn't as formal. It's like, I'm going for a walk and I'm thinking through my head, and it sort of allows your brain to sort it out and then come up with how it's going to come across. So that's a sort of a journey that I've gone on where I don't spend a lot of time like at the keyboard, like preparing or giving speeches, dry runs or whatever. It's more just the preparation in my head.
And it's sometimes when you don't have the time to prepare, don't stop yourself, don't lose the opportunity. I want to share one experience that happened 3 years ago or sometime. There was a Salesforce event happening in Phoenix, and there was a sudden change of plans, and I was invited to be on the panel. That's a great opportunity. And if I had lost that opportunity, I can't think of getting that opportunity again. So I know there's only 3 hours left and not much time to prepare, but still I volunteered and went up to the stage. And it was awesome, and it will be a memorable moment for me. That was my first time being on the panel. If I had stopped myself thinking that, no, I don't have time to prepare, I may not be the refined person on the stage. So I didn't stop myself, and now I'm so glad that I didn't do that.
That's a great that's a great point, because opportunities arise and you don't necessarily have all the time that you would want to prepare for it or whatever, but you still got something out of it. So that's a great story.
Right. It's easy to give into that fear, right? And say, oh, I shouldn't do it. It's the easy thing to say no and just, turn down that opportunity. But I think you're right. You'd regret it if you didn't do it, and you'd be proud if you do.
For sure.